Cameron, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. We've known each other for a couple of years now.
Sounds about right.
I think we first met during the A2I Industry Immersion Conference.
Yes.
And I think that was that the inaugural one, the first year?
I feel like there might have been a few GPS STEM events prior to that, but I would say that was where it was like, oh, we're seeing each other 3 consecutive days for like all day, basically.
Yeah, and just bonding, right?
Basically, yeah.
It was a big bond. So I'm really excited to have you here today, and I really want to focus on, just career development, what you've gone through here during your time here at UCI. I know you have a young family, so you're, kind of having to cover all your bases,
Yes.
both personally and, looking into the professional future. But, what drew you to pursue a PhD in cancer biology?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 parts to that. The first is why cancer biology. The second is why a PhD.
Okay.
So basically, after I graduated with my bachelor's, I was on the pre-med route. And I took the medical college admissions test, the MCAT, and did not do well. I was like 54th percentile. You usually want to be like 90th percentile.
Now, I did hear
above.
those things are tough, to be fair.
They are tough. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like I didn't do well in this exam. Does that mean that everything I've been working towards is not going to happen? And so I took this as an opportunity to take some time away from school altogether and reevaluate what I want to do. And I was like a few years into just working my 9-to-5s. And I said, I still want to go for this, but I think I want to do some research because it's going to help to bolster the application when I apply. And luckily, where my 9-to-5 was around my old university.
Okay.
And so I reached out to several professors to ask, hey, can I volunteer for like a few hours a week just to kind of learn things? And it came down to one response from one professor who happened to be doing cancer biology. I had looked at everything, it didn't matter. It was just any opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that professor said, oh, I'm happy to let you volunteer for a few hours. And as I got more into the research side, more than I ever had as an undergrad, I was like, this is actually really cool. There's a lot of like great experiences I'm having here. And long story short, that turned into a master's. I decided to forego medical school at that point. And after graduating from my master's and preparing for the next steps, I was like, I've been doing a lot of like academia-like roles, after school instructor, private tutor, things like that for like many years during my bachelor's program. And so I said, can I combine my love of both research and mentoring and teaching? And so my boss at the time was like, you're going to have to get a PhD because it sounds like you want to be a research university professor. I said, okay, well, then let's go do the PhD. And so I had enjoyed the cancer biology experience in my master's. So in going into a PhD program, I wanted to continue doing cancer biology research.
Okay. And so did you actually came in envisioning an academic career pathway?
Correct.
And at what point did things change, or did you have to pivot? Or are you still looking at both directions? Where are you at now, being that I know you're looking to, deliver your dissertation soon?
Yeah, so there wasn't this lightning bolt moment where I said, I'm going to pivot today. It was more of a gradual process where as I got deeper and deeper into graduate school, I started to learn, okay, if you want to go on this academic route, there's a lot of things you didn't know before that are necessary to transition into that role. So you do your 5 to 6 years of your PhD, you do a postdoctoral program where you, if you're going on the academic route, are going to go for another several years, maybe 4 to 5, because you want to collect enough data to open up your own lab and build upon that work. And then you're applying nationally, in some cases internationally, if you so desire, for highly competitive, very limited spots for tenure faculty track positions because the turnover rate is so low. Because people take those jobs until they retire. And then on top of that, if it's a tenure track, you then will spend a good maybe 4 to 5 years, depending on the university and the program, trying to get that tenure.
Right.
So it's almost like a second postdoc, so to speak, that says, hey, like, here's everything I've got. Is that good enough? And then, once you finally get to that point, which let's call it like 10 years down the road, then every, for the remainder of your career, it's this cyclicality of, apply for new grants, maintain your previous grants, a new cycle of graduate students, undergraduates, teaching courses. And I started to realize that while I do love research and I do love teaching, I felt like professionally that was limiting for my own personal aspirations. And on top of that, I started graduate school, PhD specifically at 30, which is usually when most students are graduating from their PhDs to get their jobs. And so I decided that if there was an option where I could do the teaching and mentoring, still be at the bench doing amazing science, but start sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, my first daughter was 3 months old when I started my PhD.
Yeah.
And so trying to be like, okay, I have this growing family that I also need to provide for. And if we want to stay in Southern California, where many of our family members reside, that is not a cheap place to live. And
Right.
so could I find a career that satisfied everything, paid what I needed to support my family, and start sooner?
Mm. I mean, and that's a fair plan, right? And I think as you go through the academic journey, you start seeing the evolution of, careers in faculty versus careers outside or even academic adjacent careers. And to your point, it's a long journey to get to the end. And it's, it's something you really need to consider, right? And I feel like there's so many other opportunities to give back if that's what you're wanting to do. Because in my opinion, teaching is like serving, right? Being a faculty member, you'll help preparing the next generation for, future research or discoveries. I feel like you can still do that in other ways. And I feel like you're kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, I definitely love the paying it forward and giving back. And as I've started to become more integrated into professions outside of academia, you do see that a lot of working professionals outside of their 9 to 5, or in some cases during their 9 to 5, their companies encourage community outreach. They want to invigorate that next generation of scientists who want to learn about this and realize, oh, there's a lot of career options that you can do. If it's academia, by all means, go for it. But if it's not, we're going to show you what else is out there.
What did that exploration look like once you kind of decided the direction you wanted to go? So did you start with talking to your advisors or your PI? What did that transition look like, and that mental change?
Yeah, so I think as I started to realize what this academia route was going to entail, and I was gradually making this pivot process, I was like, okay, I've been getting these emails for a long time from these outreach programs like GPS STEM, like A2I. I didn't usually pay a lot of attention to them because most of the opportunities were not academically geared.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I'll just look at other things. But now I was starting to pay more attention to these emails and say, okay, what guest is coming today? What's their profession? What's their industry? What insights can they offer? And so I started to try to go to as many of these as I could, not with the idea that I knew where I wanted to go. I like the way this comedian phrased it once. He said, when I first got started, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do.
There you go.
And so that was kind of the frame of mind I had going into this. Like, there's a million things now that I'm going to be looking at, but I know what I don't want to do as start.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would attend a lot of these events, start to connect with people. So you're growing your professional network. You're learning like, oh, maybe that's not for me, but that's okay. That person who I connected with, maybe they know other people who I can one day reach out to. And so it was never a wasted effort. It was always compounding.
Right.
And so as I got to more and more of these events, it also gave me more confidence to what I wanted to pursue, because I was starting to learn, maybe not that. That's kind of interesting. Oh, that's like super awesome right there. And so I think it was nice because all of those events later led to the A2I conference, which was like networking on steroids, where you really got a whole large...
We really pushed that, don't we?
Yeah, it was this giant buffet. And I think what was great for me is that had I gone to that event initially, I would have been so indecisive and uncertain of like where I wanted to go. But having spent several months learning about what's out there, I could better direct myself to converse with this person and not that person. And so I think the order of the events, while certainly not planned, did work out.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And that's actually a great strategy to share, for those that are, coming after you, right? Is to really take advantage of the resources that are there every day. And then when these, bigger opportunities come, it'll kind of give you a sense. And that could pertain to conferences, going to an academic conference or a professional development conference off campus as well. Is there a time when you had an opportunity to leverage some of the academic or professional conferences off campus?
I didn't go to a lot of conferences during graduate school, but I did go to one, but it was an academic conference where the structure of it was optimizing learning outcomes for undergraduate biology laboratory courses. So
Okay.
that was much more geared towards teaching and
Mm-hmm.
pedagogy because I'm part of a teaching fellowship program that I've been in for several years now. And so they advertised that to us. And so I can't honestly remember if when I went to this conference, I was still very much on an academic route or not,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still a great conference nonetheless. And I would argue that while what I learned there may not be explicitly applied to my future career, I
Mm-hmm.
would also argue that there are a lot of underlying fundamentals that you can apply anywhere if you know how to direct it appropriately, such as, they're trying to develop these protocols to more effectively communicate a type of experiment that they want their students to learn. And I'm like, you would literally do that for anywhere in the world with any company if you need to pitch a product or
Mm-hmm.
a marketing pitch or anything, right? Like, so I'm like, it was absolutely not a wasted experience. It's just learning how to reframe it in a desirable context.
And I think that sometimes requires a little bit more of an open mind as well.
It does.
Before we started recording, we were talking about, we have a big event coming up that called a reorientation for graduate division. And I was sharing with you that I'm surprised of the low registration. We still
Yes.
have a couple of weeks, and we all know graduate students are a little bit last minute and signing up for stuff, which is just fine. But we talked about, understanding what are these opportunities across campus that the university provides to me, and how can I take advantage of that? And you can kind of recap, what we shared, but I think open-mindedness has a little bit to do with that.
Yeah. And I think just kind of broadening your perspective. So, for instance, and I'll only speak on behalf of myself. I'm not going
100%.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. I know for me that for the first several years of graduate school, it was very much like, okay, do your work at the bench, publish your results, present your findings at conferences, get some competitive funding, do an internship if you can, and graduate, and you're going to get hired for a job. And while I know most people are going to realize that nothing in life is ever linear, I'm not here to try to convince people of that. What I am here to convince people of is that there are a lot of processes along the way that you need to be able to have a wider field of view to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were pertaining to here, I think the biggest two letters that have gotten everybody's attention in the last 4 years is AI.
100%.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that too. I think one of the things that we discussed is, the fear of AI taking over jobs and, reducing the market out there, right? And I think Jeremy Schiffling said it best, and I'll give credit where credit is due, is that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who understands AI and how to navigate it better than you do will take your job.
100%. And I think something that, depending on how much you remember from high school history class, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to late 1800s, Industrial Revolution,
Right.
a lot of physical jobs in factories were being replaced by machines.
Yep.
This is not something that is happening for the first time. And there were these groups of people called the Luddites who were against this. They fought against it. Machines are going to take my job. I'm not going to have a job anymore. I won't be able to provide for my family. And just like you can anticipate now, although there are some caveats for sure, is that it will remove some jobs, but it'll create many more.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to enhance your skill set and decide what skills can stay and what skills need to go. It's also fair to say that what's unique about AI compared to that period in time is that what was replaced back then was physical labor.
Mm-hmm.
What AI is replacing now is mental labor. And that's arguably the greatest asset we've had.
Right.
This chunk of brain at the front of our heads, the prefrontal cortex, may potentially be outsourced. And I think that is the fear that is valid.
Mm-hmm.
You get to this, there's a term in AI, they call it artificial general intelligence, I believe is a term, where you are now losing your uniqueness in thinking and developing and creating new ideas. And I think that's a very real fear that needs to be acknowledged, that people need to understand when it comes to what AI has as a threat and how, in understanding that threat, you can develop the right strategies to leverage it.
Right. I agree with that 100%. And I think there's several resources, on our campus that students can take advantage of. And, Udemy was one of them that you've leveraged.
Yes, I mean, even having 2 kids at home, if I'm just cleaning dishes, I'll put on the videos and just start learning about this stuff
Hmm.
whenever I can. So as you mentioned, there are resources, but kind of to your point we were discussing earlier, there are so many resources on campus. How do you decide which one is the right one for you?
Right.
Because oftentimes what can happen when I've spoken to other people and for myself, it's like, I don't need to go to this because I already got that from here.
Hmm.
So what is this going to give me that this didn't already give me? And so how do you decide that?
Yeah, it's a lot of navigation. And I think by doing these types of podcasts,
Right.
and spreading the word of your opinion or other students' opinions of what were positive resources for them and what they got the most out of, hopefully that will spread,
Hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your internship. And had you had an internship prior to the AbbVie one?
No.
Okay. And so what made you decide that, I think I need an internship. I need this experience before I get out into the world.
Yeah. In all honesty, I didn't look at an internship as a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of a curiosity.
Okay.
And so, as we had talked about, I was going to all these GPS STEM events, which later culminated in the A2I conference.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I didn't even know that the idea of an internship during graduate school was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I got to this conference and I started connecting with industry professionals, I started talking with them and say, oh, if you're interested, we do hire graduate students who are about a year out from graduating to work for our companies for a few months, contribute to actual company initiatives. And it's a great experience you can list on your resumes. It's great professional growth and connection opportunities. And I said, okay, that sounds cool. But even then, I didn't immediately run home and start like typing
Applying,
furiously.
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is like the next hot stock I have to invest in. I didn't really have that expedient mindset. It was more like, okay, that's cool.
Mm.
And I think the reason is that for the first several years of grad school, I really struggled to get my thesis project off the ground. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was kind of like my project was starting to gain some traction and things were starting to look up. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know if I'm in a place where I can walk away from what's only just starting to make progress to try to do something else. Because, an internship's great, but if you don't graduate, like it's kind of
Yeah.
hard, right? And
Yeah.
so I looked around casually and looked at a few companies. And I also had the limitation that because I have 2 young kids,
Right.
I can't go applying all over the country. And that's what you need to be willing to do for these internships. You have to be flexible.
Right.
And so I just applied for a couple of companies and they had a few positions at each of these companies. I applied to them and just whatever happens from there happens.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't this pressure that I had on myself. I mean, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm glad that I
Right.
but at the time I was like, it was just like a casual apply.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think now more than ever, I mean, you're about to go into the job market, and you're probably talking to companies or, resources to help you
Right.
get there because you're about to deliver your dissertation. You're at the end of the line here,
Yes.
academically, at least for now. And the trends that I am seeing out there are, really taking it back to the importance of networking, the importance of making sure that you have experience outside of the bench, outside of academia, because that's what these companies are looking for. They want you to be a well-rounded individual and fit into their culture and understand, how to handle different situations that you'll encounter that you may not encounter in the lab.
100%.
And so walk me through, once you secured this internship, what roadblocks did you run into? What did that transition look like? Share with me your experience.
Yeah, so I got the offer in mid-December, and the first roadblock was I had to talk with my PI.
Mhm.
That was the priority. I had mentioned to her several months prior in the summer, like, hey, I was going to look into some internships, but I hadn't brought up the conversation again, knowing that it wouldn't be a conversation to revisit unless I actually got an offer.
Right.
And so once I got the offer with AbbVie, they said, you have 2 weeks to decide. Of course, I wanted to say yes right away. I'd
Right.
worked so hard to get this offer, but I was also like, you know what, like, I'm going to talk to my PI first. And so, but before I met with her, and this is something I would really stress upon people, have a plan.
Mm.
And so I knew that this internship, so I got the offer in December. I was already planning to do parental leave because my second daughter was going to be born in March.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking for 5 weeks of parental leave plus 3 months of this internship that's almost like a sabbatical.
Right.
And so I was like, before I just rush into my PI's office and say, I'm signing this, I'll see you
Mm-hmm.
later, I was like, you need to have a plan.
Right.
Because the biggest concern that can be fair that your PIs might have is, how will this impede your progress to graduating?
Mm-hmm.
How will this impede my progress to getting grants with your data,
Mm-hmm.
which is the bread and butter of my job?
Right.
And so I think you really need to be considerate of that. And so my boss and I meet every week, so we have an idea of where things are at and where they're going. But we needed to factor in these two. I don't want to say the roadblocks, right? Having a second child in an internship.
Right.
But for argument's sake, let's call it
Life.
roadblock. Yeah,
Life.
life.
Let's just
Exactly.
call it life.
Yeah, exactly. So I told her, okay, my daughter's going to be born around the end of March. So here's what I envision completing on a week by week basis based on the check boxes we need to check off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go off for 5 weeks, and then I come back for only a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then the internship starts. So I had to really hustle. And so I really took advantage of the fact that I'm getting to sleep through the night right now
Right.
before my second daughter is born. So you need to take advantage of getting your sleep and really hustling. Because once she's born, I've already done this once, I know what it entails.
Right.
So she's born, we're going through it all over again, but I wouldn't say times 2, it's more exponential.
Yeah.
But I think she appreciated the plan that we worked out. It
Mhm.
wasn't a final set in stone plan, but it was more like, okay, like let's have a conversation. And she appreciated that. And I think your boss is going to appreciate that. It's like, it's not just about you. You're also considering them and what you want to do to help them out. And so we worked out the plan, and I signed the paperwork for AbbVie. And then from that point on, there were these onboarding meetings that AbbVie would have to
Mhm.
connect you with different resources to prepare you for day one. I also connected with my new manager, who during my parental leave was kind enough to invite me to the campus, given that it was right out of Irvine, a 10-minute drive. So
Yeah.
he gave me a tour of the campus. And then we went to his office and talked about the details of the project I'd be working on. It was really exciting.
That's great prep too.
Absolutely,
It
yeah. So it was great.
reduces the anticipation or anxiety going into a new thing.
Exactly. So I could just be like, all right, go back and focus on your thesis. And then, don't worry about this until day one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So once you started with AbbVie, what did that transition look like? Because industry environment is a lot different than, or maybe it's similar. I don't know. You tell me.
I would say it's case by case.
Okay.
So the department I worked in at AbbVie is called ophthalmology drug discovery.
Mhm.
Ophthalmology, the eye, drug discovery. You're classifying identified compounds with potential to do the job you want them to do.
Mm.
And so in that department, it did very much behave like academia in one sense. So I would have meetings with my manager, and we would be like, okay, here's what the data looks like. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did da-da-da-da-da? Let's get to the whiteboard and start writing stuff down. And that part was very academia, because that's exactly what you do here. You brainstorm, you come up with ideas. I mean, every job kind of does that more or
Right.
less. But that's also very similar to the style of thinking and strategizing I had done with my PI
Mm.
in graduate school. The part that was a little bit more unique is that in graduate school, you have several years of troubleshooting, optimizing, failing before things start to work. I heard it once that on average, the first 2 years of grad school are like you just failing a bunch of times. Not everybody goes through it. Absolutely did. But for AbbVie, I only had 10 weeks.
Right.
And that is a very fast amount of time. And there was a huge roadblock that happened shortly before I started. So about 5 days, 7 days before I started, my assigned manager took a new role at a new company.
Oh, wow.
And so I was assigned to that person's manager. And so new manager, new project, still the 10-week deadline, a new field I had no background in. I knew nothing about ophthalmology.
Right.
And now it's a new project, new acronyms, new everything. And so it was kind of like sink or swim.
Right.
And that's the part that is very different in my experience from academia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to incorporate a lot of strategies on the fly to make that still work,
So you had to be flexible and adaptable.
like a chameleon.
Yes, absolutely.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah.
And so every week had to count. And again, I have a second daughter who's only a few, it's a pattern.
Right.
When I started grad school, my first daughter was 3 months old. When I started AbbVie, my second daughter was 3 months
Oh my
old. It's like a
gosh.
recurring cycle.
Right. What's next?
But right. What else can you throw at me?
Yeah.
And so every week was careful strategizing. Every day was strategizing. It
Mhm.
was read the literature to familiarize myself with this brand new field. It was walk up and down the hall and meet everybody I can to know who's the go-to for this, for that, etc. If this isn't working, who's the go-to person, who's the expert who can help me quickly troubleshoot.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, scheduling meetings with our collaborators at corporate who I was going to hand off a protocol I was developing to.
Mm.
And so there were a lot of moving parts. And on top of that, like asking people out to lunch because you want that professional development aspect, right?
Networking.
Exactly. Yeah. So there were a lot of moving parts, but everybody was so friendly.
That's
Everybody was
awesome.
super approachable. And sometimes I would come across that in academia, sometimes I wouldn't. And
Mm-hmm.
industry by no means is perfect, but I think part of it was also because he's only got 10 weeks.
Right.
Like if he just started a full-time position, he can kind of, figure it out.
Yeah.
But they were so helpful. I would always feel bad, like, I didn't get this to work again. Can you help me? It's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I can't do it right now, but can we do it later? Yeah, totally fine.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and by the end of that 10-week internship, I think I connected with like 40 people.
Oh, that's amazing.
And like several of them I still talk to. I ran into one yesterday on campus. So it's like, that's what those internships, in my opinion, are about.
Mm-hmm.
It's making those connections who will be your advocates.
Absolutely. And I think it's also good to understand, how things operate in industry.
Yes.
It's about ROI, right? And it's about, are we investing in the right things? Are we developing the right things? Are we going to bring these to market? And if something doesn't work, that's money lost,
Exactly.
right? And so, but also there's that time that needs to be considered because
Correct.
your board of directors wanted it like yesterday.
Yeah. I would argue that there are some parallels to that in academia, not as explicit, but in the instance where, like you said, in industry, it's like, is this commercializable or not?
Mm-hmm.
In academia, is this going to get my grant renewed or not?
Right.
So
right.
there are still the financial aspects that are the parallels. But as you mentioned, right, there are, for instance, when I was at AbbVie, we had a meeting one time with our group and somebody in the group was like, there's 10 different ways I can answer this question. And my boss was like, what are the 1 or 2 ways that are sufficient, not cutting corners, but are sufficient to give us the confidence to move forward?
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes in academia, you can try more than 2 experiments, right? And sometimes it's encouraged because you want to be like, if I attack it from multiple angles and I arrive at the same conclusion, it's harder to dispute. And so it's just, there's different strategies, but I would say there's still a lot of parallels.
Yeah. One last thing from a perspective point of view. So what surprised you and what you were kind of like, that confirmed your expectations with the internship?
What surprised me? They still work incredibly hard.
Yeah.
They still get a lot done, but they don't have to have the same hour requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't remember the last time I didn't go into my lab on a Sunday and a Saturday
Mm-hmm.
in years. And that's kind of the expectation as a grad student. No one's going to celebrate that. That's what you're supposed to do. But in industry, people would go in on the weekends, but it was like occasionally. And it was kind of like, I want to jumpstart something that I need to do on a Sunday so I can finish it by a Friday
Got it.
versus a
Yeah.
Monday to Saturday.
Yeah.
But they still got a lot of work done. And there was a lot of collaboration. Nobody shied away from helping you.
Mm-hmm.
And you could, yeah. And, you know, I've talked to some people and they don't always agree with how pharma does things. Pharma's evil. It's like the Sith Lord,
Right.
you know. And I'm like, nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
But they are so collaborative. And I think what surprised me is just like how much they're willing to help you. And I'll explain what this is. Like when I would meet with professionals at A2I and GPS STEM, and I would talk to some grad students, the concern is like, I need to have 100% of what they're looking for to even be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I would talk to a lot of these professionals who are like, we're fine with 50.
Right.
Like 75 is awesome.
Yeah.
100%, you're a unicorn. And I know unicorns out there, but 50% is fine.
Yeah.
And that really surprised me too. Because I remember when I took a tour of the campus with my manager and we walked through the project and they said, do you know how to do this? Oh my gosh, I don't know how to do it. I'm sorry. Like, no, we'll teach you. Don't worry about it. I was like, you mean I don't have to have everything?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to have an expert knowledge and everything. And so I think that was also the surprising part is that, and I think it can best be summarized by one of my professional connectors at Abbey who said, as a bachelor's and master's student, we pay you to generate a product that we tell you to follow for making it. As a PhD student, we pay you to come up with the ideas for how to develop and optimize the product.
Right.
And so that really resonated with me because they want you for your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, if I have a background in biology, I can't apply for a physics internship.
Right.
You do need certain fundamental technical skills, obviously.
Right.
But the most important thing that I haven't always seen people be able to communicate when I go to professional networking events is how transferable their skills are.
Yeah.
I remember I was at an event one time and this other graduate student told me what they did. And they're like, this will never be applicable in an industry setting anywhere. And I'm like, well, tell me what you do. And they told me, I'm like, okay, I'm not an expert, but I can understand a few of the things you're telling me here. And we had an AbbVie professional next to us. I said, I would think you could do this. They're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think, it'll surprise you to realize that you have more that you can leverage than you think. You're not just someone at a bench. And that's where it comes down to branding and storytelling.
Yes. And I think that the programming that we run with A2I and GPS STEM, that would be one of the things you'd want to leverage. Just those resources.
Yes.
And of course the Career Center as well. But I think that's a great call. You want to understand your transferable skills. And I think that, going back to AI, you can kind of leverage ChatGPT in that way. By typing in the job description of something that you're interested in and seeing if you're 50% there or 75% there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then honing in on how the skills that you've acquired throughout your academic journey will then translate to, what you want to do.
And I would even argue if you take it a step further, because I use AI every day.
Mm-hmm.
There are right and wrong ways to use it, of course. But to your point, don't just ask AI if you're well aligned. Ask it how you can reword everything. Keep it truthful, but there are ways that you're like, you know what? When you frame it like this, don't just say, I know how to do X. You say, I used X to significantly do Y.
Mm-hmm.
I saved the company this much money. I made them this much money. Or if it's a science experiment, I increased this outcome by 1,000-fold.
Right.
So you're not only now showing them that you have the technical skills, but you're getting at what I think is the most important part with these companies, which is how are you going to help me answer these questions, complete these projects, and help us to move this to the next step?
I really think this is such incredible knowledge that you've gained, during your time here, and I can't thank you enough for sharing it. So from a personal perspective, you talked about your family and your 2 young daughters. As you near degree completion, how are you thinking about work-life balance and maybe a geographic or lifestyle considerations, that matter to you and your family?
Yeah. It's funny. Every time I hear work-life balance, the way that I've learned that term, I don't personally agree with. So when I hear work-life balance, and not that everybody will hear it this way, but this is how I hear it is, work is so stressful, it is so difficult and life draining that I need to balance it and get away from it
Mm-hmm.
to live my life outside of it. But and so that's the definition I don't agree with. So what I think about more is if you've spent a considerable amount of your life investing in your education, you're kind of doing that because you want to find a work that isn't draining.
Mm-hmm.
You should find a job that you love enough that you're willing to suffer through the challenges that come with it, but find joy in the things that maintain it.
Yeah.
And so when I hear the work-life balance aspect, I want to find a job that energizes me so that when I get home to my kids and my wife, I have energy reserved for them.
Right.
You know, I did grow up in a house where I had parents who didn't work jobs they wanted to, and it would be so draining for them sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that they didn't always have the energy, even if they wanted to be present.
Right.
And, you know, I didn't appreciate that until I became a parent. But then when I get home, I have the energy to give to my kids from a great day at work, and then they give me energy so I can go back to work and put in that effort to a job I love. So it's like, you know, it's a feed forward loop.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of going back to your point there, what's important for me is, can I find something that I'm not going to love it every day?
Right.
That's unrealistic. But can I at least find one thing every day that I love about it that's going to get me through those hard days? Because PhD's been just like that. I've had some days where I'm like so distraught, but I'm like, I can find one thing.
Right. Right.
To the geographic point, you know, Southern California is nice, partly because there's a lot of companies that are geared towards the kind of work I want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And something that I think is important when you look for a job is, you know, they have what are called these biotech neighborhoods or biotech hubs,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like a San Francisco, a San Diego.
Right.
And I think it would be nice to think about places like that, because something you have to accept going into industry is volatility
Right.
with job stability.
Yeah.
And so the hope you want to have is, if you're working at a company and that's the only company in town that is geared towards your professional skill sets, you're going to sometimes have to uproot your family,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how close the next relevant company is.
Right.
But if you're in those biotech neighborhoods, you walk right down the street, and assuming you were laid off, right? Not
Right.
fired.
Right.
Assuming
And you experienced that at AbbVie. I believe they had some issues, maybe after you left.
there was some restructuring that occurred,
Right.
unfortunately. So yeah, and when I would talk to people about it, they're like, that's just industry.
That's the way that it goes.
Yeah, you know, and that is a very huge difference that can occur in academia, right? You know, once you've obtained your tenure, you know, you arguably have more stability in your job where you can ride out the fluctuations of the economy.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, and so the idea is that, you know, good people will always be hired by good people. And so if you lose your job up the street, you walk down the street to the next company and they're going to be like, they're a good employee. You know, there was just like corporate restructuring, or someone got bought out and they avoided duplicity in jobs. You know, it has nothing to do with your ability to be a good employee.
Yeah. And to your point, it happens all the time. It
Happens all the
happens in
time.
tech, it happens in, you know, pharma, biomedical, all of the stuff.
Right. And now AI is arguably shifting it even more rapidly.
Most likely, yes,
Yes.
in certain circumstances, unfortunately. Well, I love all of our conversation today. I feel like we touched on, you know, all of the ways in which, you know, the journey, you know, you can go, the directions you can go on your journey, if you will. And I would ask, you know, what advice would you give to other PhDs who want to explore internships or industry careers? We talked about the importance of, you know, a solid resume and sharing, you know, quantitative and qualitative you know, substance on that resume. We talked about networking and the importance of, you know, understanding, you know, who can help you and who's there to you know, to help support your career. And then we talked about the importance of internships and getting that experience outside of academia. So any other career advice that you would give your colleagues, I should say, PhDs and masters for that matter as well?
Yeah. So before I started on this journey of connecting with people at GPS STEM events and A2I, I had two questions that I asked myself. The first one is, how will doing an internship during your schooling time in grad school benefit you professionally?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's the first question is because you're going to realize everybody's answer is the same. They want to apply their skills outside of an academic setting.
Mm-hmm.
They want to grow their professional network. They want to have a competitive line on their CV.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to increase the likelihood of being selected for a job or having opportunities for internal referrals from their connections when they apply.
Right.
The problem is none of those things are going to distinguish you when you're applying to internships.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to say, I don't care for any of those things, which is why I have question number 2, which is how will you personally benefit from doing an internship in graduate school? And there's more to think about on that. It's like when you have a personal statement when you apply to a program.
Right.
What is going to make you willing on a Monday morning to draw the blanket that keeps you warm on a cold morning and get you out of bed to go to work? What's going to bring you home at the end of the day, still having a bunch of cogs going off of in your head with ideas like, oh, I want to do this tomorrow? And as you start to really get into that introspective thinking and understand what makes you you, that's what's going to help you to set you apart when you apply. I remember when I was at AbbVie and the manager I worked with, I asked her, because they were looking to hire someone for a new position at the time. And I said, what's one of the most important things you look for? And they said attitude and personality. And above all, storytelling. And so the more you know yourself, the more you can start to craft your brand.
Right.
And as you start attending all of these events, it's like open mic night for a comedian. You get a little bit better every time. Some stuff misses, some stuff hits, but hopefully by the end of it, you have a solid 5-minute routine that's going to hit them every time.
Yeah.
And so by the time you get to interviewing, you know your story, you know why you chose this company, why you chose this position, and you know why you want to work with these people. And so I think that's something that people probably already know, but maybe don't take enough time to focus on.
Yeah.
And I really think that more than anything, it's not your technical skills. It's not, it's not your publications, at least not in industry.
Right.
It's not, this conference you presented at. It's not even who you know. It's who knows you.
100%.
I loved when someone did a 180 on me. I was like, that actually is a lot more accurate than the former way.
Yeah.
And so by the time you've understood yourself and you've effectively communicated that self to the right audience, like for instance, when I was looking into internships, I kind of brushed it off to the side. But then one of my connections said, hey, I worked in this department and the person I worked with is looking to hire an intern. Do you want me to connect you? And I was like, I know what story I want to tell.
Right.
And I think more than the technical skills, which opened the door.
Right.
It was the personality, the passion, and the attitude that kept it open so they would invite me in and have a seat.
Yeah. It's been fun for me because I've watched you go through this evolution, from the first time we met until today. And you're ready, man.
I appreciate it.
You're ready. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been enlightening, I think. And I am looking forward to our listeners reviewing it. Where can they connect with you if they'd love to continue the conversation?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the easiest.
Right.
I'm on there all the time. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, more than happy to extend a helping hand, which would be great because once I graduate, that'll still be there.
Yeah.
If they want to go to the reorientation event where I'll be moderating,
Yes.
happy to plug that for sure.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, I would say LinkedIn's the easiest. I check it all the time. So if you want to reach out and connect, happy to help.
Thank you.
Of course.